Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Inspiring Leadership podcast. I've got a fascinating guest for you as part of a four-man team that's just been up Everest with Al Cairns, who we've had on as a previous guest. And I think that Kev Godlington is going to recommend his other two colleagues are going to come on as well, because they've had fascinating lives as well. But Kev, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a former member of the Royal Engineers, the Airborne Forces, British Special Forces, and the Foreign Office. Done an awful lot in his life. He set up a charity, a national charity, Tickets for Troops, which supports UK armed forces personnel by providing access to major events. But he's just been up Everest, and that is a story in itself. So, Kev, welcome to the Inspiring Leadership podcast. You deserve to be on here. You've certainly inspired me. Tell us a bit about what you've just done with Everest, Mission Everest.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. So we, the four of us, set up this idea probably somewhere middle of last year that Al and I, whilst in a pub outside Number 10, we're going to climb Everest in a week. And the main reason for that was to raise cash for Scottish Little Soldiers and a number of veterans charities, but also to create some symmetry between the logistics, which was pretty phenomenal, to get us all, four of us, to the base camp and then through all the rotational camps without dying, and back down again and back to the UK. And in the end, we did it in 6 days and 12 hours, which was a significant cutting of the previous record, which was, I think, 21 days.
Wow, that's a huge difference. And you use some what we call unconventional acclimatization methods. And what was, during that climb, what was the most mentally demanding, physically demanding time during the climb? And how did your training that you've had over the years help you push through those toughest times?
So what happened was we were using hypoxic tents to sleep in, and we used them for 3 months, and they scrub the air and take out the oxygen. So actually it simulates in a normobaric environment, a hyperbaric environment high up on the mountain. So for example, at 8,000 meters, the 7 or 8% oxygen, it would simulate that. And it's very hot. It's very sweaty. Every night we had to sleep in these tents and then do 3 or 4 hours training throughout the day, attached to our sort of nagging nutritionists and PTs and all the rest of it. But we also trialed a new methodology called xenon gas, which is a noble gas. It's a mild anesthetic gas. Some people thought we were breathing it on the mountain, which would be ludicrous because you'd fall asleep. We had an application before we went because it has neuroprotective properties. So normally pulmonary edemas occur quite low down on the mountain, 6,000 or 7,000 meters, but at 8,000 plus, cerebral edemas, essentially you have a stroke. And we passed 3 or 4 people who'd freshly died on the mountain that almost certainly had cerebral edemas. By breathing this xenon gas, you get some neuroprotection. They also attack these amyloid plaques in the brain. And we found, this is our experience, that whilst there was no physiological benefit, it didn't make us go any quicker. It did give us less squeezing on the head above sort of 8,000 meters. We've all climbed a lot quite high, so everyone's used to the sort of pre-AMS feeling of nausea and headache, and it's like having a hangover when you wake up. All that was greatly reduced. So xenon does offer quite significant, I think, neuroprotective properties above 8,000 meters, but it doesn't give you any go-go juice where you move any quicker. Now, that attracted, of course, a little bit of criticism from the community of climbing mountaineers, because they thought that we were cheating, but so is oxygen, and so is taking Diamox and all the other stuff that mountaineers take. So when we actually did summit in pretty incredible weather, and we were the only 4 people out of about 100 that got to the top, suddenly everybody started to think, oh, well, maybe these guys aren't so cheaty after all, when it was minus 50 and blowing a hooey. So in the end, it all worked out for the best, and we can use this data to help special forces deploying to high altitude environments, and we can use this data to protect high altitude Sherpas, who are often the heroes that have to put in high altitude rescues and end up, I mean, they were trying to rescue this poor dead person. Well, I'll rephrase that, bring down the body of a dead person, And they were falling all over the place, these Sherpas. They were really struggling. So if this can help them, it's a good thing. To your second question, what was the hardest bit? The hardest bit was by far coming down because I got diarrhea and I relied on the lads to make sure I was okay. It was pretty epic and soul searching coming down Everest when you've not slept in 3 days with the shits.
Oh, no. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you've just said there, Kev. Firstly, I've a couple of friends of mine, a husband and wife team from the UK who climbed Everest together. And I think the thing they found the biggest shock was the number of people who were dying or had died and were frozen there on the mountain. It's a bit of a shocker. And also, I had Harry Buddha Magar, you might remember as a Gurkha veteran who got both legs blown
I know
off.
Harry.
Yeah. What a guy! I had him on the podcast, and he was fascinating. But a number of them talk about, and it's a relevance to business actually. This idea of goal obsession, summit focus that they've. And Harry said this, that he met someone as he was coming down. They were trying to summit, and he goes, "It's too late. You should turn around." No, we're gonna. No, you should turn around. And they ignored him, and they pushed on, and they died. And in life a bit, some people can get very obsessed about a particular goal when actually it's beyond all sensible things. I don't know whether any of that triggers any thoughts or responses from you.
Yeah, I mean, ego and stubbornness are the fundamental problem there, right? The old adage, prior planning preparation prevents. I mean, we put incredible planning into this, like a military operation. Everything had serious thought put into it, and we war gamed everything. And Al was doing combat estimates every 5 minutes, which ranged from 30% success to 12. And all you need is SBS mountain leaders to give the negativity of the fact that you're going to die. But we had incredible leaders on the team, which allowed us to mitigate risk, evaluate risk, and properly plan. And every eventuality was considered, whether it was Stas with Through Dark building our summit suits, which were brand new. They'd never been built before in the way they'd built them. Whether it was our climbing equipment and the way we were going to be clipping in and out of the safety route. It was all considered. How do we get around crowds if there was crowds, which was a huge problem. I mean, ultimately, it wasn't a problem because no one summited, so we had the mountain to ourselves.
What happened to the others? Why did the other 100 not make it, but you did?
They all turned around. They were told the weather's going to get too bad. I mean, half our Sherpas turned around. And we had some very serious conversations above 8,000 meters in the dead of night when it was blowing a hooey with everybody. And the decision was made, we are going to continue. So, but we were managing risk, right? To Harry's point that sometimes people chase the summit too much. We didn't have any other summit windows. We didn't have the luxury of going back to another camp and resting and going again the next day. So I suppose our appetite for risk was higher. Mm-hmm. But I like to think that given our heritage and our backgrounds and our reliance on each other as a fast, tiny, mobile team, we didn't have Western guides. We just had high altitude Sherpa supporting us. So we were guiding ourselves. We were able to make those empowered decisions and, grizz it out, basically.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, look, congratulations. I mean, phenomenal on what you did. And also, when you met your video team on the Khumbu Glacier, you had this huge avalanche that hit you all. I saw it on film. Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. We'd only started a few hours before, and we'd walked all night through the Khumbu, which is just weird because you have these giant ice cubes the size of houses that are creaking around and ladders and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff to negotiate. It's like a giant adventure playground if you're a bit weird like us. But then, we came out over the tundra, and then suddenly Nuptse, the mountain that often sheds its vast amounts of snow, decided to drop a load on us, and we were waiting for it to roll over us and hopefully not kill us. And thankfully, there was this sort of re-entrant where a lot of it dumped in. But nonetheless, we still got hit quite hard, and we were completely, whited out.
And on the film, the cameraman is laughing hysterically, isn't he?
Yeah, so our cameraman is Sandro. He did a lot of stuff with NIMS on the 14 Peaks
Oh,
documentary.
right,
And
Nims.
he's himself a commando. So he fits in neatly with everybody because, screeching and laughing and having a good time when you're being avalanched at sort of 3 a.m. is part of the course, right?
Yeah, and Nims Perda, I've always wanted to have him as a guest. Do you know him very well or not?
Yeah, I mean, mainly Stas and Al because of the SBS sort of association, but not really. I mean, he's been doing his thing and we've been doing our own.
Yeah. Well, talking about doing your thing. I mean, the other aspect people might not know about until I'm just going to explain it is as what beyond your military and your mountaineering achievements, which are considerable, you are passionate about sustainable business, particularly in the ethical sourcing of organic fair trade palm oil and improving supply chain transparency. That's not a usual combination with the background that you've had.
No,
Um, what was that transition like, and what are the parallels between leading in high-risk military operations and leading sustainable business initiatives in the palm oil industry? Tell us, is there connections or links?
yeah, I think it's because I'm a glutton for punishment. So I left the military and I started work in the Foreign Office immediately. In fact, I was recruited into the Foreign Office, and for a while I operated in post-conflict West African countries. So it was a transition of stabilization. In Sierra Leone, the Lone Peace Accords had been signed. We were taking weapons off former rebels and fighters, and the immediate good thing to do was agriculture and to retrain as farmers. Palm oil grows indigenously in West Africa, so it's the good palm oil. It's not the naughty one that kills orangutans in Indonesia and Malaysia. And most of it's artisanal, so it's smallholder. And smallholders need to be cooperatized to give them access to addressable markets. And so once I'd trained them and built these networks, we found ourselves then in a situation of, well, disrepair with the British and American governments who no longer thought that Islamic fundamentalism was a problem in Sierra Leone because we'd done such a good job. And so quickly I found myself with no budget and lots of unemployed farmers. So I left my various employers and went into privatizing this and raising capital. Now, the transition to do that, really, it never dawned on me just how much negative press we'd get. Palm oil is a pariah product, and immediately people jump to extreme conclusions, like most things. And also, there is this don't tinker in Africa white man syndrome, which, when you've done, like I have now, nearly quarter of a century in Africa, and some of my closest friends, associates, and connections are there, it still lingers this. And so complex supply chains are hard enough because they're complex without being complicated by the sort of politics of that. But then here we are today. It is the world's largest organic fair trade cooperative of palm oil. And you will find it in every supermarket in the United Kingdom and Europe. And
Wow.
you will almost certainly have consumed my palm oil this week.
Wow.
Whether it's in toothpaste, organic soap, shampoos, infant milk, crisps, chips, biscuits. If you buy sustainable palm oil, or brands do and companies do, from smallholder cooperatised West African farmers and not the naughty big stuff, then the traceability of that will almost certainly have meant it will have come from one of our supply chains.
Wow. This is big. And well, let me take another question. The palm oil industry is often criticized for its environmental and social impact. You just talked about that. What are the toughest obstacles you faced in creating a genuinely ethical and transparent supply chain? And how have you overcome the skepticism from suppliers, consumers, and the media?
Yeah, well, they've come for us many times. And I always say that the greatest advocates are the brands and products that stock your ingredient. They perform incredible due diligence. I mean, a lot of our customers take Hips Infant Milk, for example, and Ritter Sport Chocolate, two huge German brands, multi-billion-dollar brands, and revered for their sustainability and radical traceability. They come and do their homework before they buy our product, way more than any certification agency, any NGO, any government, or any newspaper. and they just wouldn't do business with you if you hadn't got the very best credentials. But to your point, traceability is a very difficult thing to sort of demonstrate. And it's a bandied word, right? People say to you, how sustainable are you and traceable are you, without really understanding the word. And traceability for us means every single bunch of fruit that comes from Mohammed Kamara, the farmer, out of 10,000 farmers, has to be organized in such a way that when we press and produce the oil and it goes into the tank in Rotterdam before it goes into food manufacture, we can show an evidence where that oil came from. So it's farm to fork, tree to transaction, farm to face if it's personal care and products. The whole traceability piece has to be proven and evidenced through different technologies that we use. And this also means that we guarantee we pay the farmer a premium, because the main point of this when I started was that we wanted to pay our farmers in Africa more. And that meant the consumer had to pay more. And the thing about food is that we are traditionally used to paying not enough for good quality, and we'd sooner spend the money on something else. But for good food, high quality food, not full of nasty additionals, and traceability and sustainability at its core, so it does no harm, you just have to pay a bit more. And it doesn't actually have to be a lot.
Yeah, and this is fascinating because working with a variety of the big supermarket chains and also the product lines like Unilever and others, they would be obviously fascinated with what you're doing. So that's really, really interesting. Now, what an interesting life you have had, Kev. This is what you do, what you've done is not the norm. And yet leaders listening around the place will be, fascinated by what you've learned along the way. I mean, another one, you co-founded the Ticket for Troops. You've led expeditions. There must have been failures and setbacks. And what did you learn from a couple of those failures and setbacks that's relevant for other leaders listening around the world?
Yeah. No, you're quite right. There's always failure around every success, right? I think the older I get, the more I rely on team. So as an entrepreneur, I'm not a very good manager and I'm not very good at the commercialization of something, but I'm very good at taking an idea, getting everybody to buy into that mandate and then build a team around it. And I'm very good at trusting people, and I'm very good at motivating them and incentivizing them and saying, hey, right now, get on with it. So for me, it's all about team. I think every single thing I've made a mistake on is when I've tried to monopolize the value chain of that and the decision-making process. And it's led to non-collaboration, and it's led to usually problems. So but equally to that, I will say also, they have to listen, right? If I have a vision, it has to be, and within the business that we're trying to get done, then I hope that everybody also gets involved and there's loads of energy and no negativity and it's positive and people are mindful of the fact that it may not be yes today, but it could be and should be yes by Friday. So, but at that point, then it's like no micromanagement. Everyone lets it rip, and I stay out of the kitchen.
Yeah, and you're touching on something really important in just a sentence, and I just want to play that sentence back. Don't monopolize the value chain. Every time with any CEO who I'm coaching, or I'm doing an offsite in Munich tomorrow with a 16-person organization led by the chief commercial officer, and there's always the danger that the leader gets too involved in, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Let me get in there and do it. And others go, okay, well, forget it.
Yeah,
he or she might as well do it all. And
if you've got a strong character, they'll just let you do it.
yeah. And time again, this idea of empowering and elevating others gets subsumed by the old style command and control, not what you're used to in special forces or airborne forces, where there's the airborne initiative, what do you think? And you go and do it yourself. But like, they tell you what to think. And if they want your opinion, they'll give it to you. How have you balanced over the years these different styles, and how did you develop your own style?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you quickly learn when you leave a large government organization that usually is very well resourced and has got lots of cash is that business and startups are incredibly lonely and impoverished.
Yeah.
And you quickly find yourself doing the job of 10 people, and the luxury of being able to delegate and hire someone is a reward for your success, right? Having a new human is like a gift. It means, whoa, I can now have a human to do stuff. You can't just go and hire 20 NCOs to become subject matter experts and deploy them, and they spend half the time sat in the pub, right? Business is frugal, and frugal economics prevails. So whenever you start a business and whenever you build something new from scratch, and these are really significantly difficult things to do, to build a business that generates 1 million a year is very hard. To generate a business that then makes 10 million is much harder. To get it to a worth 100 million is less than 0.00000. And so the team and the hiring of the team and placing them in the appropriate places frugally is, I think, fundamentally key and the hardest thing to get right.
Yeah. And of any of your businesses that you've run, what's the biggest value of the business that you've created?
Oh, well, certainly in Africa, all of our sort of sustainability business collectively are valued at over 100 million. And I think that certainly my new business that I'm working on has the potential to be much bigger. I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate, but I've worked also incredibly hard. I mean, I started with zero, and I couldn't even get a loan from Lloyd's for £5,000. And people have a different perception of what starting from zero is, right? And it certainly gets me quite excited when I hear people, well, I did it with 50 grand and I did it with 100. I mean, that's already quite a bit.
Yeah. But just stay with that one, Kev. Starting from zero, I mean, you've got a hell of a background story, origin story. Take us back to the birth of Kev, how life was as you were growing up, what took you into the Royal Engineers, just where does the drive and the leadership and the mountaineering and the entrepreneur, where does this all come from?
My granddad was an Italian Jew migrant that went to Blackpool as a ice cream salesman, fleeing Mussolini. My mum was 17 when she had me. She got knocked up by a local smackhead. He then went on to a career in prison. Unfortunately, things didn't work out. My granddad died, who raised me till I was about 5. And we moved to Preston, and I ended up in children's homes.
Wow.
And then by the time I was 14, I was out of school, stealing, thieving, you can name it. I was sniffing it. And it was going to come to a fairly poor end. There's lots of members of my family that have ended up in pretty, dire consequences. And so for me, probably my last altercation with the law was join the army or go to jail. A story that's familiar amongst fellow hooligans of the North. Blackpool is the Saint-Tropez of the North, as anyone knows. And it was then the poorest town in the whole of the UK. So it was even beating Easterhouse in Glasgow. So I joined the army at 16. I joined the Royal Engineers. I was one of the last intake through the Beachley Boys Army Apprentice College. And let's just say I never looked back then since, right? I never went back, looked back. It was always straight ahead, get stuff done.
Wow. What a hell of a story. And I'm interested in many entrepreneurs like you are also dyslexic. I'm dyslexic. I wondered, have you ever been tested?
No, I don't think I'm dyslexic. I mean, I've got a long list of other issues that I'm very happy to send you in a private email.
No, but I just
think without the TISMs, the DDDs, the ODDs, the PTDs, the PTSDs, the ADHDs, and the ADDs, I think I've just got all the serious ones that are really bad.
So living with Kev Godlington, I mean, Are you on your own? Have you got a family? What is it? What's the story?
Oh no, I have an incredible wife who stops me from making too much carnage.
Yeah.
And we've been together nearly 20 years, and I've got three kids. Eldest is
What?
at university, middle one is doing GCSEs, the smaller one just plays football.
You, she must be a saint to cope with you, because I can't imagine with a
I think,
character as strong as you. I
yeah,
don't think any normal person would manage you.
no, I think that's a good word, saint.
Yeah.
But we have a laugh. I mean, everyone works hard, and then we just have a lot of laugh, right? We have a
Yeah.
lot of laughs. I mean, no one takes themselves too seriously in our house because they get abused immediately by each other, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
perhaps that's you're touching on something, particularly with your airborne and your special forces background. That when things get really bad, a sense of humor is very important, isn't it? To almost, I'm listening to the it's called Team of Rivals about Abraham Lincoln, and he actually recruited all the other Republican candidates who wanted to be president into his cabinet, but they were always bickering with each other and playing each other. But he just somehow kept this team of rivals together, and they were very talented. But one of the things he was really good at was belly laughs and great storytelling. How have you found that helped you in some tough corners, particularly when you're coming down Everest with the shirts?
I think that's interesting. I mean, I had heard that Abe Lincoln kept everybody that had been protagonists inside the tent.
Yeah,
Um, it's a it's an interesting one, and I think I try and emulate that a little bit in business. I like strong people around me.
yeah,
But what we do with the family, of course, is probably not dissimilar. Everybody is encouraged to be cheerful through adversity and to just be a bit unrelenting, right?
yeah.
Um,
Very
it's
true.
really the only choice we have in life is to be indomitable and unrelenting, whatever it is, or to just sit back and be passive. And I think we all probably in our house prefer to be a bit more gregarious.
Yeah, and I'm still fascinated with the routes you could have taken that you didn't take, doors that closed, and all the trouble you got into as a young lad. If you look back to when you were 16 and you went in your DeLorean back to the future and you met young Kev, who was just about to go into the army or jail, what would you say? This matters and this doesn't matter. What bit of advice would you give a young person now?
Absolutely none. I'd give myself no advice. I'd let it rip. And I hear this question a lot. People are, well, I would go back to Kev and say this. I wouldn't say anything. I'd say, tough shit, get on with it.
I love that one.
Because it ruins the experience. I would not give myself any advice, nor would I have deserved any. I'd just do it all again. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.
And I know you would, and I'm not going to give up on this one because I think it's an interesting one. I don't want you to go back perhaps to when you're 16, but over the years during your training, you've had some superb role models that you've learned from, mentors, coaches, friends who've helped you out. And they've given you good advice, haven't they? Because otherwise you won't have been. You just even Arnie says, I'm not a self-made man. I stand on the shoulders of giants. Other people have helped. I've learned from others. Now you
Yeah.
must have had some very high caliber, particularly in airborne forces and special forces, colleagues who you learn from. There's be one or two Machiavellian ones, but generally very high caliber, the best of the best.
Yeah.
What's your attitude to getting mentored and coached or watching others and learning from them? How did you learn as you got in there to the apprentice college at 16 and you never looked back? You were looking forward, but who were you watching? Who were you learning from?
There's a guy who was my first troop sergeant called Chris Alsop. He's still a very dear friend now. And he was incredibly robust and fair. The thing that I quickly assimilated in the army was that it was actually the same little metal beds as we had in children's homes and in the hostel I was in. And so I quickly adapted to this environment of a bigger room. And whereas other boys at 16 were struggling and missing their mummies, I was reveling in this. And of course, it meant that I responded well to strong male role models who I hadn't had. who were very strict with you, would often give you a punch on the arm, which today would be incredibly frowned upon, but it was never meted out unfairly. There was reason and rhyme to this. It was always because we had failed to clean the barrack room, or we hadn't showered properly, or we hadn't cleaned our equipment. This quickly became logical to me. Do things properly, do them well, don't get punched on the arm. Don't get beasted and run around the parade square 50 times. Don't have to parade your parade square till 3 a.m. on the drill square. These things were quite logical to me, and other kids couldn't figure this out. And I'm like, I don't understand why you don't figure this out. When I was in children's homes, we had the shit kicked out of us for no reason. Predators would come to the children's home and try and get some girl in a taxi, or come as paedophile men for the boys. And it was a sweet shop, and there was no one protecting anyone. This was the world I came from. So the world of the military, the world of business was ordered. And it became a quick, logical transition, which I adapted to very fast.
Yeah. And you would have to learn to be incredibly robust to cope with, firstly, the children's home, and then early days of the armed forces. How have you developed your emotional and social intelligence? Because people might think that you haven't developed that as well as you clearly have. Otherwise, you wouldn't have persuaded and influenced people to do things and to follow you and to be part of your team.
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up in kids' homes in the late 80s. It was grim, right? It's well known what happened in the north of England during that period. These were big children's homes. It was just horrific, right? I'll leave it at that. But the army in the early 90s, in 92, when I joined the Army Apprentice College, was incredibly civilized, even by today's standards. So developing emotional intelligence, I think, firstly, I think I was just born with a bit of a female brain anyway. I mean, as my wife repeatedly tells me, probably because I just like gossiping a lot. I don't know. But I think you tend to be born with a quota, and you can choose to develop that, or you can choose not. I mean, the intelligence is a beautiful word, and you may not know it means interledger, and into the ledger means being able to bring all these different wonderful things, emotional intelligence, IQ, together into a narrative that allows you to exploit it to the very best of your ability, and of course compel people to do things that you need them to do, but in a good way. And I think if you are born with a good interledger, which has enough intelligence and enough emotional intelligence and empathy to interpret and understand people's needs, and maybe I learned a lot of that in the Foreign Office as well, then you're able then to, of course, find a pathway that usually is not at odds with what everyone wants. And that's business, isn't it? It's understanding your consumer's need, your product, it's understanding your team, you have to understand all those component parts. No good just understanding the team, the manufacturing, and not the product or the consumer, because then you're still not going to pull it off.
Yeah, I can see. Have you written a book yet? Because you've certainly got a number of books in you, and I think your ability to learn from multiple sources, deal with multiple situations, is rare. You are unusual compared to many of my guests, and they're all impressive people. But you've got a background origin story which would shock any of them, and they probably wouldn't have coped anything like you have. But also how you've seized on all these opportunities and kept moving, climbing up the mountain, kept summiting. And I still think of the four of you at the top of Everest, but we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Let's do a quick tour around what I call the Inspiring Leadership Compass. It's just 8 elements which allow you to just share a bit of your wisdom and your experience, what's worked for you and might work for others listening to this podcast. Firstly, moral quotient. Your values, your beliefs, character. There's Stan McChrystal. He's written his book on character. Yeah. He's talking about we need to have a conversation about character and the lack of it in our politicians like Trump and the like, Boris Johnson, all the rest. And yet they seem to have got on and succeeded, but they have no ethics and no morals, and they'll do whatever it takes, and they'll be felons and still become presidents. So What did you learn when you let your values slip? And what advice would you give to others when their values slip and how they bring themselves back on to true north?
Yeah. One of my favorite books is The Morality of Metaphysics by Immanuel Kant. And without going down a rabbit warren of philosophical thought on the difference between morality and ethics, I think that if you've lived in a world where violence, egregious violence, is normalized, and I've lived in a violent world since I can remember, where anything is often okay, then you have to be especially careful with how you quantify your own personal morals. And I don't mean by the sense of rules of engagement in armed conflict or living in children's homes where rape and violence are second to everything that occurs. I mean, for me at least, I took great care in how I handled working in very poor countries and building cooperatives with Africans. We took great care in ensuring that, for example, female genital mutilation was front and center of our initiatives. And often in situations where you're doing it for the first time, you're having to find the priority of how you build your moral compass. And again, it's back to your question on empathy, I think. So I would listen and listen as hard as I could to the people around me, females from the community. What do you want? What matters to you? And it was usually infant mortality. It was access to maternity care. It was please stop cutting my vagina. You know, really basic stuff in the West that we wouldn't even think of. But in West Africa, certainly in the early noughties, this was the feedback we were getting. So from a business perspective, that was my compass immediately. It pinged to north by listening intently to what the communities that we served wanted. Before I listened to those that wanted a product, what should it look like?
Well, it's interesting you say this. It really resonates, which is why I would like in the future you and my wife Lee to chat with each other and meet up with me. When Lee set up the Inspiring Leadership Foundation, particularly helping victims of violence against women and girls, and her own story, what she'd been through, and escaping from violence herself, and a tough childhood story. When we went to Kenya and we worked with a charity called Hope for Teenage Mothers, the girls were 13 when they were having babies. They had FGM performed on them. Yeah. And we were providing the creche for the mothers at 13 to have their babies looked after so they could finish their own schooling. And going into some of the toughest parts of Nairobi in a room which was about as large as where I've got my little podcast here, where everybody was in there, maybe 6 or 7 of them, but it was the tidiest room I've ever seen anywhere. Yeah. There was a moment where we heard a kerfuffle, because normally it was very, very carefully. They looked after each other and kept the law for themselves, but there was someone getting beaten up, very, very badly beaten up, because he'd been stealing from one of the houses. The police came and they said, "Oh, he's still alive. Tell us when he's dead. We'll come back and pick him up." Yeah. Because they sorted it out themselves. But the rooms and the houses, they managed it themselves and they looked after it with so little. And I will always remember that. It's stuck in my mind. So thank you for what you're doing in Africa. It makes a huge difference. Let's go on from moral quotient to PQ, meaning and purpose. What gives your life meaning, purpose? You know, you've set up Tickets for Troop, which is really helping so many people, and a big drive with Scotty's Little Soldiers and the fundraising that you've all been doing with the Mission Everest. What gives your life meaning and purpose? And when people are listening and they haven't got meaning and purpose, any tip you'd give to people to find their own meaning and purpose?
Yeah. For me, it's always creating something from nothing, but that's not always possible. I have in later years chosen quite complicated businesses which intrigue me. And if anybody is going to want to do something and meaningfully want to do it, it has to be interesting, right? And always it has to hold their gaze and fixation for long enough for them to iterate and repeat the process such that it becomes success. So always my advice would be find something that genuinely makes you excited.
Yeah.
Something, and it doesn't have to change the world. It doesn't have to be £100 million business. It could be anything. It could be finding the courage to finally escape the matrix, which is the employ of others, which ultimately we're all doing when we're working for other people, is kind of prostitution of our goods and services.
Yeah.
Whether you're a lawyer or an accountant, you're still on an hourly flick, right? And entrepreneurship escapes you from this. It really, truly gives you the freedom and independence to say, once you've got through the hard bit, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm taking it off. Monday, Tuesday, I'm going to be here. And you have autonomy of your own personal faculty and agency.
Yeah, I love that. And particularly with my wife and I being entrepreneurs and self-employed, we can do what we want with the charity as well in our spare time. And if I want to train in the gym this morning and walk the dog and then start later, I can do that. No, I think that's been a game changer for me when I left being a wage slave, and I then did what makes me passionate, my vocation. I found it really rewarding. Health quotient is the next one. And clearly with you doing this preparation for Everest and all the training you've done throughout your life, what are a couple of tips you'd give about mental health and physical health to people listening that work for you? Because I imagine, it's something you're constantly working on, isn't it?
Yeah, I am. And I think we all will inevitably, if we are successful and able to achieve some success, will have demons that you carry as a part of the baggage. I mean, important for me is physical and mental health are the same. They're all wrapped in one. I can't be mentally healthy if I'm not physically healthy. And therefore, I try and do all the usual things. Look, I'm not going to bore you with, I do saunas and cold plunges. You must do what you do. Whatever makes you feel better, whatever flashes you out of a period that may become psychological impairment, you must do. And for everybody, it's different. For me, it's cardiovascular work. It's hard runs, hard cycles every time.
Yeah. And
because it just resets, Yeah.
And with the life you've led and all that you've done, do you want to talk about PTSD or anything that you've experienced, or would you rather just give that a miss? You don't have to.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I just don't have it. And I don't have any trauma, even though I've been exposed to trauma.
Yeah. But you've had many of your colleagues who have. And what's your advice to people who've got partners who are suffering, but perhaps don't realize, is there any signs that you can tell?
Yeah. I mean, everybody struggles at different times in different ways. And, we've just seen a load of dead people on a hill, and all four of us will be fine with that because of and I don't mean old dead people, these were quite fresh. And the net effect of seeing these people curled up who've had their last moments only the night before needs to be memory polished. And that's my own invention of the term. Yeah. So you talk about it, you take it out, you polish it, you give it a clean, and then you get rid of it and you don't think about it again.
Yeah.
So my advice to people who are struggling is try not to overthink, but think enough.
Yeah.
Because there's far too much encouragement to sit here talking about our feelings all the time. And whilst that is true to a degree, you don't want to overthink and overtalk through your feelings. Because all you're doing is reaffirming and revalidating these things, which are often pretty grim, right?
Yeah.
And my advice to veterans is talk to your mates, keep the community going, talk to people you trust who have had similar experiences. If they've seen blokes blown up or they were there when your mate got shot, talk to those mates that were part of that community. Keep talking once a month, but don't talk every day to everyone else about it because they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. No, I think that's...
Don't talk to everyone, just talk to those that matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then do some exercise and stop whining and eat good food.
Love it, Kev. I mean, you are so unusual. On the one hand, we've got the morality of metaphysics by Immanuel Kant. On the next one, we've got sort of blunt lessons from how to cope with, shitty, difficult times. And in your time, even though you haven't had PTSD, didn't you get smacked on the brain? Didn't you have a bit of an injury from that?
Yeah, I got a traumatic brain injury and a brain bleed. I got a 7.62 through my helmet, and that was something I was very interested in with this xenon gas because amyloid plaques occur in traumatic brain injuries, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, all the good stuff. And so that's a separate piece of science that we're trying to look into. I mean, I'm perfectly fine now. It was not that big of a deal. And in many ways, I was very, 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 very lucky. But yeah, I mean, it's sobering how close things can come. It's the anniversary of Tumbledown, and my very dear friend Robert Lawrence got shot in the head without a helmet. Similar situation, but this took 20% of his brain off, and he was half paralyzed and has lived his life in great difficulty. So thank God for Kevlar, and there we are.
Well, that's a very small world, because I served in the 2nd Battalion Scots Guards as a platoon commander
That's his unit, yeah.
just after they'd returned from the war.
Mm.
And because Robert had been injured, I got his platoon, 13 Platoon Left Flank, 2nd Battalion Scots Guards. And he was spoken about very highly by all his colleagues. And of course, I joined a battalion that had been to war, but I hadn't been to war, but they were all recovering from what had gone on. And the people who in the moment were the bravest were the ones that were the most troublesome in barracks, but out there they were good. And the ones who talked a good story actually were found to be wanting because they were bullshitters. And the quieter ones actually came to the fore and did amazing things. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've given up trying to find out who's any good at fighting because it's always the people you least expect it. And then the people that you probably do expect tend out to be quite, underwhelming.
Yeah. No, I think it's just a lesson for life, isn't it? Never judge somebody else. Never come with preconceived views. I find I'm trying to improve my judgment, but not to be judgmental. And I've been brought up in quite a judgmental environment. You know this with some of the officers who've probably got right up your nose with that sort of arrogance. And do you know who I am? And I'm in this regiment and you're in that regiment. And I'm this rank and you're that rank. And it's just so wrong. And of course, my best man, when Lee and I got married 10 years ago in Jamaica, Errol would get very wound up as a Jamaican by the racism from British officers who thought they were better. And if I hadn't held him back a couple of times, I think he would have smacked somebody and we would have had a big incident. But it is this, don't judge people until you know their story, until you've lived their life. And rarely do you do that. We've got so much, Kev, to talk about. But we've only got about 10 minutes. So I think let me just give you the choice. We can talk about resilience. We can talk about leaving a legacy, turning around toxic teams. Which one takes your interest out of those three?
That's a little Pandora's box. I mean, legacy. Should we do that one?
Yeah, let's do legacy.
Yeah, legacy is a good one.
So legacy is a fascinating one. Legacy quotient. We talk about it. Leaving things better than you found them. Stewardship. Like you don't own, for example, your 3 children. You don't own them. You're looking after them. I've now got 4 children who are all married, 2 stepchildren, 2 of my own, and now I've got 4 grandchildren. I don't own them. I'm just looking after them, and they're a joy. And they vary from 8 weeks old to 4 years old. But leaving things better than you found them, leaving a legacy where, as you said, taking things from nothing and making something of them, doesn't have to be building a bridge or building Trump Towers. It just has to be making things better than you found them, and also the children you bring up so that they are equipped to cope with life. You don't own them. So I don't know, what's your thoughts on legacy?
For me now, the legacy is I've started a new company called the Rewilding Company. We're planning on planting 100,000 hectares of rainforest in Africa.
Wow.
We've planted about 5,000 across different things now. So already the size of a small town. There's carbon credits in that. There's climate neutral. There's nature restoration. there's biodiversity protection, there's restoring mangrove swamps, bringing back endangered species. I mean, it's a full-on thing, and we're working with partners. Through Dark is one of our partners, where we're going to be filming some stuff soon with them in Sierra Leone on the rivers, protecting areas. And that's my legacy, because for me, it's going to build a significant business that will benefit communities because it brings other income in. It's putting a value on nature, and carbon credits have got a lot of negativity because fundamentally there's a lot of carbon cowboys, right, that do a poor job. We got attacked recently because, again, the same stories. You're stealing land for Africans, which is just complete nonsense. And these days I listen to these stories and I just think, really, is that the best you've got? But nonetheless, they still keep trying. But we've succeeded in getting certainly through now, financing, funding, building. We've got a lot of staff and we're growing the business. So that will be my legacy, because I'm hoping that if I can restore a huge swathe of rainforest and create an economic value on that premium, and make people pay for it and empower Africans to do it. So create custodians of rainforests properly, rather than as just whining, don't cut that down. Well, they're going to cut it down if they need to grow cassava or palm oil or something else. But there is a way to do multi-cropping, combinational agriculture, organic farming, and nature restoration. And we know that because our scientists have proven there's a good way. So that's going to be my legacy. And then for the kids, teach them to just build their own pathway so that they end up with their little singularity that matters to them, and then show them how to create the toolkit to be able to do that. Because if you make it easy for people, there is no self-worth, right? There's just none. There's just no self-worth, and you won't feel like I'm buzzing after Everest and have that energy, because I've worked very hard to build my relationships with the great people I did it with, and the opportunity for us to access the money needed to pay for it. And it is privilege. It's privilege that I created. And I'm not embarrassed about that, right? I'm not embarrassed to build privilege that I created. If it was given to me for free by everybody else, then that would be a problem. So I think building agency for your children to have that self-belief that gives them the toolkit to really feel like they got shit done and they did it, even though they're growing up in a big house. And as I tell them all the time, I'm rich, you're lodgers.
That's right. They're passing through your life. They don't own you, and you don't own them. Now, before we go on to your top tip, I do want you to talk about 2 inspiring leaders you'd like to appreciate. And you have just broken these records in going up Everest in under 7 days. And we've already had Al Cairns on here, who you've spoken very highly of, and everybody is hugely impressed by Al. But there is Stas and there's Garth, who made up the 4-man team with Al and you. Do you want to just talk about what you respect about them as leaders, and about the importance of the team of 4 of you?
I know you've had Al on, but he won't speak as openly as I will. The man is just one of the most incredible, inspiring leaders I've ever had the privilege to know. And I have become a great, great mate of his, and he me. I'm so grateful for his support on the mountain when I got sick. It was his leadership that helped me. He had no calories left. He was completely on his chin strap, and he stepped up. You know, I mean, you don't get to be a brigadier and would have been Deputy Director Special Forces, former commanding officer of the SBS, as a joke, right? And gave half his salary up and career to go and try and make change as an MP. And it's a thankless task. And veterans say incredibly terrible things about him, but his resilience and his fortitude and his spirit just inspire me every day. He's just one of life's incredible humans. So Garth was our expedition leader, former SAS lad and Guards officer and Gurkha officer. Now flies and senior captain for British Airways. He's very boring. He's a big nerd. He talks a lot of really boring mathematics, but he is a beautiful human being, and he will find a mathematical solution to any problem you can think of. and then he'll send you a 25-page sit rep on it. And you should immediately ask for the aid memoir and crib card. But he's gorgeous. We love Garth. Then there's Stas. Stas is short, has lots of tattoos, and really, really likes fighting. One of the most decorated service personnel of his generation, won the CGC for just doing all sorts of gnarly stuff. He's very funny, nearly as funny as me, but not quite. And has built, an 100 million quid brand through Dart with his partner Louis. I mean, he's just an absolute pipe here. Boundless energy, brilliant human from the north of England, which makes him really, really hard and resilient, as you know. Not far from me, 20 miles down the road. He's a younger version of me, basically. Hang out with younger, fitter, stronger, more brave men. That's my belief.
I bet the conversations and the laugh and the Mickey taking of each other must have been, as you're building up to this, must have been phenomenal.
Well, you'll appreciate this, Jonathan. So when me and Stas do something wrong, we get created a slab of Stella. But because we've got a guards officer, it's a box of Paul Roger champagne. So me and Stas are owed by the two officers, I think, about 95 bottles of champagne each.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're going to claim that very soon, by the way.
Yeah, what a group. Well, look, it's been absolutely fabulous. Let's do the top tip. So, Kev, would you say who you are? This is going to be a standalone piece. Say who you are, what you've just done, a bit about the work you do in Africa, and then give us your top leadership practical tip.
Sure. My name is Kev Godlington. I am 49 years young. I am ex-Airborne Forces and British Special Forces and British Foreign Office. I've just climbed Everest with a team of Special Forces lads in 6 days and 12 hours. It is the fastest known record from London to the summit and back. With Al, who is a former SBS commander, Stas, a former SBS soldier, and Garth, who is our expedition leader, former SAS and Guards officer. My top tip in business is be indomitable, unrelenting, but be prepared to repeat everything. Iterate, repetition, iterate, repetition. By volume alone, by repeating and iterating the problem and doing it more than everyone else, you're guaranteed to come out on top.
Fantastic. What an experience it's been having you on this podcast. The breadth and the depth of your experience, your knowledge, the things you do, it's almost like you've lived 5 lives. So thank you very much indeed for being on Inspiring.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I'll look forward to a dinner or a beer, and we'll have to get together, yeah?
We will definitely do that. Kev, thank you very much indeed.
All right, buddy. You take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.